Jesus Christ.
Hey everybody, this is Harrison with Level 1 Gaming, or Pergo1. I'm reviewing Metaphor Refantazio, which is the first game from Peace Studio, helmed by ex-Persona 5 director Katsura Hashino, and I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, because I'm from Alabama. Anyways, while the game is not entirely from the main Persona studio, the inspiration here is quite clear. You have the same time system, upgrading skills between story moments, companion content interactions, etc. Unfortunately, as somebody who greatly enjoyed Persona 5, I was ultimately let down by Metaphor, as most of my time spent playing this game left me wishing I was playing Persona 5 again. And a big reason for that is that the game just doesn't really want you to play it. Around the 8 hour and 31 minute mark for me is when the game finally let me play it. And I said to myself, cool, I'm done with the tutorial now. That was a long tutorial. Little did I know. Then I said the same thing to myself at the 30 hour and 6 minute mark. Oh God. Finally, it was true after those 30 hours. The game finally relinquished control and let me play the game.
Play the game. Go to my Best Buy, right? Play the game. Right? Play the game.
If you're familiar with the Persona series, the gameplay loop here is going to be very similar to you. You're plopped in an area, given X more days to do side quests, upgrade stats, buy armor for the next story event. Metaphor, however, shakes that up by mostly not opening up that gameplay loop until hours upon hours after starting the game. And I was somewhat prepared for this, as Persona 5 is very dialogue heavy, but at least after the opening intro for Persona 5, you get to play the game. Genuinely, there are moments where the following occurs. Multiple times the following occurs. 4 to 6 minute anime cutscene, followed by another 4 to 5 minute in-engine cinematic, followed by another in-game dialogue conversation that you're just static talking to your party members. And when you're finally given control to play, you take 10 steps, open a door, and the same thing starts all over again. And I'm not saying that to bash the game, but just that it's truly baffling, just baffling to me from a game design perspective that this is the way the game is playing out. And even when you do get to a spot where you can open that door and you get to an actual combat system in the first few actual areas or hours, you're barraged with tutorial boxes. At one point, genuinely, I clicked through about 7 to 10 set of tutorial boxes for 3 different things before I could start a fight. And the most damning aspect here about all this is that this seems to be a consistent pillar of game design until the solid 30 hour mark of this game. You might get to there before I do, 30 hour mark I mean, but for me it took about 30 hours. So what is this game anyways? The premise here is that essentially it's more Persona but more fantasy or medieval. You play as an elder boy who is from a tribe that is outcast for being born with forbidden magic. You travel to the capital here with your fairy companion Galka, who is an amazing companion and voiced wonderfully. With your quest being to lift the curse on your childhood friend, the rightful prince of the town, who was believed to have been assassinated years prior. As you arrive, the king is murdered, and a fantastical race to see who becomes the next king starts. But with the king's death comes the main brux of the game. Essentially a popularity contest that decides the next king of the country. And the story tries to juggle a few noble topics such as racism is wrong, who rightly deserves to be king, the importance of a democracy when choosing a leader, why a monarchy is important, how power can corrupt, how someone can stay in power and stay noble, will they become corrupted. The problem with all of this is that the plot is all over the place thematically, and it's as subtle as Godzilla. And the game simultaneously tries to espouse the importance of democracy while also being pro-monarchy, and those are not topics that really go together. And along with that, the game makes it a point to talk about how anybody can be king, a commoner can be king, whoever can be king. This is a main directive that the game focuses on for a solid hour of the game. But then you get to the spot that determines, people enter the race to be a king, who's going to be near the race to be king. And to even enter the race, you have to own this massive ship, which disqualifies 99% of the population. So the only people that enter the competition are like 7 or 8 dudes that are all super rich. It just kind of defeats the purpose. Overall, the story is an entertaining spectacle, and it has some big moments, but overall, personally, it came across as an altruistic melodrama bogged down by horrible pacing and bizarre, incongruous themes. So, Dungeons and Dialogue is the name of the game here. So, gameplay, unfortunately, is another mixed bag for me. Even when the game lets you play, Metaphor suffers through numerous curious oddities. Throughout the story, for example, you're sometimes presented with dialogue options to choose a decision. These are lies. There were moments that I would pick an option, and both of my companions would, paraphrasing, but genuinely say, "No, you're wrong. You're an idiot. Why would you choose that? We're doing this instead." Or there'd be other times where you're given 3 options, and be like, "Okay, I want to do option C," and they're like, "No, you're an idiot. Choose another one." You're like, "Okay, what about B?" And they're like, "No, I was doing answer A." Then why would you give me that choice? The aspect of gameplay here really rings hollow and makes you feel more of a spectator than a player with actual agency. And overall, that's a pretty good summary of this game, that you constantly just feel like you're a spectator watching things unfold rather than playing a game. So what about combat and dungeons? Combat here is your standard turn-based with special basic attacks with team attacks. The unique thing here is the introduction of archetypes. On the whole, I really like these. They're a fun aspect and bring some unique characteristics to gameplay from games that I haven't played recently. Archetypes are essentially classes. Each archetype has its own set of skills you can unlock, and a really cool aspect here is that you can unlock and assign archetypes to your party members. Once unlocked, these can be freely switched outside of combat. Along with that, each archetype can inherit one skill from a previously unlocked archetype, allowing you to do some cross-archetype attacks. I swear to God, if I have to say archetype another time. These are fun at first until you realize how limiting they are in the way that combat is designed. So to elaborate on that, each archetype specializes in physical attacks like the warrior, or magic attacks like the mage. Most enemies are only susceptible to one or the other, but if they're susceptible to both, they always have a weakness that's a different one. And on the whole, enemies are only susceptible to your special attacks, which use MP, which is basically mana. Let's say you start a battle against foes who are entirely physical attack resistant. Gee Willikers, I hope you brought an archetype for each party member that does magic, and hope you switch to those prior to the battle starting. If not, you're really out of luck. Yes, the game does give you a gracious option to instant restart a battle, but if you're unable to escape that battle, the only other option you have is to die. And what happens if you die? Oh, you're reset to the last manual save point, or the autosave, which in some cases happened to me twice or 3 times. That's back at the beginning of a dungeon, causing you to lose upwards of 10 to 15 minutes of progress. Or let's say you didn't prepare in town the right way before a fight. Annoyingly, the game considers this a feature and gives you the option to restart from the last free roam spot, which genuinely could be hours of progress lost. It's a truly bafflingly bizarre game design decision, and I understand on the whole that it's a system meant to reward critical thinking and preparing, but to me it was more frustrating than anything overall. Along with that, the only times I had to actually return from dungeons to regroup at towns were when I ran out of MP. Finding items to replenish MP are rather scarce, and without MP attacks, you essentially do 0 damage to enemies and will not win. Healing though is always in abundance, especially if you have a healer with you in your group, and these issues highlight how one-note battles are, as the option to do a basic attack is essentially worthless. And to give you some examples, there were a couple dungeons that I was in that I was doing fine. My party had full health, and we were constantly just swiping through all these enemies. But when I ran out of MP, I had to return to town because all of a sudden I was losing every battle and everybody was dying constantly. And it feels weird that battles are boiled down to just how much MP you can preserve and use in a fight. In some dungeons, you'll encounter the same type of enemies over and over again. And that's okay, a lot of games do that. But here it kind of highlights how low brow or one note the combat is, in that you can use the same exact attacks in the same exact order, with the same group of enemies to win every single time, which feels a little weird. I've never played a turn-based combat game that you can do that in. But on the other hand, the game sometimes suffers from a problem that XCOM had, where you whittle down an enemy to like 1 health and you have a 99% chance to hit, and you have 3 turns with your party to hit the guy, and you miss once, and the second attack misses. Oh, in this game, by the way, if you miss an attack, you lose 2 turns. So if you miss with that first attack, you got 2 turns that are gone. And then the enemy has 3 turns, even though it's 1 guy left. And when they get to that spot, the enemy will then spam a bunch of AoE attacks and get lucky and crit in all their attacks and wipe most of your party. Genuinely, I have video evidence of this happening so many times. And this happened enough that it genuinely seemed like it was by design. And as you get further on in the game, you realize that some enemies should be pushovers. So you'll whittle down a group to where it's like 1 or 2 guys left. And these are guys that you fought like 6 hours ago that should be easy. But all of a sudden now, they can spam a bunch of AoE attacks. I can't say that word. A bunch of AoE attacks that do damage to your whole party. And it will just, God, it just destroys you every single time. So you have somebody that plays healer that all that they do every single turn is just heal, and that's it. So you essentially only have 2 people attacking. This is the equivalent almost of AI constantly throwing grenades in FPS titles. To go even further, some enemies are able to inflict status effects on your party, which is a very normal thing for RPGs. Such as your party can take 2 times damage, but they deal less damage. With a healer on your side or a mage, you're able to negate these status effects with a skill of your own. However, upon doing this, the enemy will just recast the same status effect again, causing you to spend more MP or mana on your next turn to remove the status effect. So you do that, and they cast it again. This process will just go back and forth until the enemy dies or you run out of MP to complete the fight. And my point here is that there isn't a whole lot of strategic decision making to be made in combat when enemies like this are this one note, to the point where you'll do a fight that for me lasted like 8 or 10 minutes. And I was doing the same thing every single turn for 10 minutes because that was the only way I could complete the fight without running out of mana. And I know I can hear the people say, you should have brought more potions that give you mana. And you do. And I did. But you'll get to some parts of the game like this where you're constantly just using mana over and over and over again. And you're at a point early in the game where you don't have that much of it unlocked yet. And that really sucks. So let's talk about graphics and audio. In the past, Persona games have known for their amazing looking flashy art design and combat effects. And the art style here does harken more to the medieval fantastical setting. And while it does contain some fun art designs, it tends to fall hard on the drab grays and dull browns that medieval design in games have been known for. Which is a shame, given, like I said, how flashy some of the character designs or combat moves are in this game, or how they were in previous Persona games. Besides that, there's some just glaring issues, such as the textures in this game that sometimes genuinely look downright unfinished. Especially the ground under your feet and battles in some of the cities, like the concrete. These textures genuinely look unfinished. And this can extend to other areas as well. Sometimes you'll be in a boss fight and you'll see enemies spawn in. And there's supposed to be smoke that'll hide them spawning in, but the smoke doesn't hide them spawn in, so you see them appear out of thin air. And this isn't just a glitch, you'll see it happen again and again. Overall, the title looks like a PS4 era title, and that is quite disappointing for me. Audio-wise, the tracks do find a way to bring something fresh sounding to the medieval period. Most of these tracks here are epic, grand, and actually fun to listen to. That is until you hear them repeated for the 80th time. God, shut up! One of the main combat tracks here is awesome sounding to listen to, like I said, for the first time. But the problem is it's maybe a minute and a half long, and it repeats constantly. Sometimes even in dungeons, it'll just play on a loop, regardless if you're in combat or not. And that would be fine if it were an ambient track. But it's not. It's loud, grand, and bombastic, and it just gets in your head. Outside of combat, what's great is all characters are brought to life by some amazing voice talent. They all deliver solid performances that evoke emotional responses, especially your fairy companion. She does a great job and her voice actor is amazing here. However, in combat, she and others can tend to repeat the same lines over and over and over again. Sometimes these will trigger immediately after the last line is finished, or sometimes they're on top of each other. It got so bad that towards the end of the game, I guess about actually like 50, 60 hours in, I would just turn voice volume off once I got in combat, because they would constantly be saying, so-and-so's hurt, you need to heal them, or so-and-so's weak and do this, but it would just repeat constantly. And that sadly leads me to the conclusion. I really wanted to love this game. Given its pedigree, why wouldn't I? But I walked away honestly pretty disappointed. Requiring players to invest 30 plus hours into a game before it truly begins to open up is an unsustainable ask. Even if the gameplay were perfect, I still couldn't recommend it at full price. It's not a terrible game, it's just an above average one. If you're a diehard Persona fan, I think you'll still love this, and you'll probably send me death threats because I'm not giving this a 10 out of 10. But if you're a casual enjoyer of these games, I'd wait for a sale. In today's gaming landscape, there are tons of amazing experience. Any titles, AAA, AA, what have you. And they're all pretty well paced, and some of them can be accomplished in a few hours. And given this, a game that's just okay or above average isn't enough of a reason for me to sink 30 to 40 hours into a game before it fully opens up to the meat of the game, let alone recommend that at full price to others. God, man, that's just depressing. Anyways, I'm Harrison /Perker1 with Level 1 Gaming. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe, and holler back. We'll see y'all next time. See ya. I do want to add one quick edit to say that the bones of this game I do think are very good. It's just getting to those bones in the gameplay is a tall ask.
Anxiety breeds the world's cruelest monsters.